Hey folks, this is Mr. MegaManFan. Like, share, comment, subscribe. You know all the things to do. Continuing with the PlayStation Vita theme this week, we are looking at Homebrew on the Vita for Homebrew review. I'm going to assume a little bit of cursory knowledge going in. You know what Henkaku and HN Core are. You know how to put Homebrew on a Vita using vita.hacks.guide, and you are okay with modifying a system in a way that Sony probably never intended through custom firmware. Given all of that, there are some amazing things you can do with Homebrew. And one of the things that I really like that I've discovered recently is called Better Homebrew Browser. If you use the Homebrew browser that comes with Vita Deploy when you hack a Vita, it never does anything. Or some people say it will finally load if you just leave your Vita alone for 10 minutes. But who wants to assume it's doing anything when it sits on a black screen for 10 minutes? I certainly don't. At least with Better Homebrew Browser, it shows you that it's downloading and building a database, and it takes a couple of minutes, but when it does, you can find wacky things like Super Mario Kart, which you may remember from a famous Vine Sauce video where he plays a parody Mario Kart game that's jankily programmed on purpose. It runs terribly, so it amuses me that this is on here, but as you can see, you can select different databases and different types of options in the Better Homebrew browser, and it works really well. But while we're downloading Super Mario Kart, which unfortunately didn't seem to work on my Vita, let me show you something that does. Gato Roboto. Now this one's kind of interesting. You can download the package from the Better Homebrew browser, but you actually need a copy of Gato Roboto to put into it. Thankfully, the game is available for free on Good Old Games, and if you go to the GitHub for this Vita modification of Gato Roboto, it even tells you get it from Good Old Games or buy it from Steam. But if you get the Good Old Games version, it's completely free, and what you do is open the zip file, run the installer, and then you'll have a folder with all the Gato Roboto assets. Then you apply it to a patch to turn it into what assets the Vita needs. And it's also recommended that you overclock your Vita to 500 megahertz, which you can do through a plugin once you have Homebrew enabled. But that will give you the best performance while playing Gato Roboto. And if you've never played it before, it's a Metroidvania type game starring an adorably cute cat who uses a mech suit. That's exactly what you're watching right here. I've played through this game several times now, and it never really seems to get old for me. There's only one thing that doesn't work the way I would expect it to compared to the other versions that I played, and that's that if you find custom color palettes, which are hidden items in the game, they don't display properly on the Vita. So just stick to the default black and white. But if you do, it's a fantastic game. If you even remotely like Metroid or Castlevania style games, you would absolutely love Gato Roboto. And since it's free, and if you have a modded Vita, you can run Homebrew, why not? It's incredibly fun. But there are other super fun things that you don't even need to download and patch to make work on the Vita. There are things that are ready to go right out of the box in the Better Homebrew browser, and I'm kind of amazed at some of them because of the fact that there are intellectual properties involved, but I do know that Sega has taken a rather lax approach to enforcement of IP compared to some other companies, especially as pertains to Sonic the Hedgehog homebrew games, because there are a lot of hacks and ports and games starring Sonic that are not officially made by Sega, but they seem to turn a blind eye to it for the most part, unless you were purposefully going out of your way to physically print up a Sonic homebrew and sell it for profit and claim it was a canon part of Sega's Sonic the Hedgehog games, then you might get into some deep doo-doo with them. But if you just make something for fun and put it on the internet for people to download, I guess they consider that free advertising for Sonic the Hedgehog. And in this case, I feel like I was already giving Sega my money because just today I bought the greatest hits version of Sonic Mega Collection for GameCube over at Ben's Game Zone in Ralston. So they're getting my money for Sonic the Hedgehog, even if they're not getting it for this Vita port of the Sega Master System game. And it runs like a champ. I mean, you would expect it to, since you can run Sonic the Hedgehog games through RetroArch using all the different emulator cores that are available for RetroArch. But this is a little different because this is not just emulation of a Sega Master System. This is a port with widescreen support, and it looks beautiful. And I have not noticed any slowdown or tearing in this version on the Vita. So I think this is really fun, and it's free. I mean, the Vita itself certainly isn't free. If you get an import one like this, it could set you back a bill. If you get a domestic one, it could be more than that. So you might want to hack it and take advantage of some of the homebrew options that are available out there. And you might just want to play backups of your physical games as well. Beyond that, I can't really tell you what to do. I'm not going to go into gray areas that you can or can't justify to yourself. It's up to you at that point what you do with a hacked Vita, but you can certainly try things before you buy, which I always advocate on this channel. So feel free to use emulators or other means to go ahead and sample some of the things that you might want to spend your hard-earned money on. And like I said, if you spent the hard-earned money on a Vita, you might as well unlock it and get the full potential out of it. It's just amazing to me that the community takes the time and effort and puts the love into making things like a widescreen port of a Sega Master System game for the PlayStation Vita. I mean, there's diminishing returns on that. Let's be honest. The Vita only sold like 20 million units worldwide compared to what? 100 million for DS and maybe 80 million for 3DS. I don't know the exact numbers off the top of my head, but it's like 1/5 the audience. So to put that kind of time and effort into a much smaller device, you are really showing some love to the community because you're giving something that you may put more effort into than people ever play. Whereas if you've got 100 million units of a console out there, you know that quite a few people are going to play it. Which also goes to show when you go to look for Vita games, sometimes you really do want to homebrew and hack because you can't find Vita games. Like, you go to stores and they maybe have 2 or 3 on the shelf if you're lucky, and sometimes they only have loose carts and they don't even have the boxes to go with the games. Which is one of the reasons I like to shop at Ben's, because he actually gets Vita games in the box, so it's nice to actually get a full set as opposed to a loose chip. And they are very small. They're like Nintendo Switch sized, so if you didn't put them in a storage case or a knockoff PlayStation Vita style box, you might just lose track of them at some point. So I like having the physical box for the games, and I like playing the Sonic 1 and Sonic 2 remakes on my hacked PlayStation Vita.